A family trip. A choice no one wants to face. When life is weighed between his wife and his sister, he couldn't choose, and that silence killed them both. Not everyone who survives can be called a survivor, because sometimes torment is the final judgment. The ravine. Silence is also a voice. The sun beat down on the bitterroot forest, streaking through the dense canopy of pine needles, spreading gold across the leaf-covered trail. The tires crunched steadily on the cobblestones as the silver SUV pulled to a stop in a secluded spot that few people knew about. The door opened, and Ethan Calder stepped out first. He was a tall man in his 30s, with short brown hair and a wary gaze, as if he were always considering something that others couldn't see. He was followed by Jessica, a woman with a gentle smile but a sharp gaze. She was his wife, a third-grade teacher, smart, thoughtful, and the keeper of the family fire. Finally, Emily Rhodes, Ethan's younger sister, a petite 26-year-old former mountaineer and nursing student. "This is the place to start," Ethan said, pulling his backpack from the back seat. "You won't get lost, will you?" Emily smiled, holding up the paper map. Jessica flicked her shoulder. "If you do get lost, at least you'll be a nurse. And my brother only knows Excel." Ethan chuckled, his eyes sweeping over both women. He felt lucky. A weekend away. No phone calls, no emails, no deadlines. Just green forests, fresh air, and family. They started walking up the trail. Birds chirped. Dry leaves cracked under their feet. Ethan walked in the middle, occasionally turning back to check on the two behind him. He wasn't the adventurous type, but since Jessica and Emily both loved nature, he agreed to this trip. And most of all, it was a chance to reconnect after their recent silent arguments. Along the way, Emily told jokes. Jessica took pictures of the old oak trees. Ethan, though smiling at them, had something hidden behind that smile. A vague unease that he couldn't name, but he brushed it off. After 2 hours of walking, they stopped by a small stream. Jessica took out her sandwich. Emily kicked the rock lightly, creating ripples that spread out. Ethan sat on a large rock, looking up at the sky. "Do you think this is happiness?" he asked suddenly. Jessica looked up, squinting at him. "Why do you ask?" Ethan did not answer right away. He just looked into the deep forest ahead, where the sunlight could not penetrate. The afternoon passed gently, as if the forest were coaxing them into a long dream. A gentle breeze blew, carrying the scent of young pines and the dampness of the earth. They continued deeper into the forest, following a small trail marked by ribbons tied to trees. Ethan checked his map and checked his compass. "We're 2 miles from the main campsite," he said, but Emily hesitated. "I don't see the red ribbon anymore. Are we sure we're going in the right direction?" Jessica looked around, frowning. Nothing unusual, but the trail markers were clearly gone. The wind whistled softly through the trees, and the air around them seemed quieter than usual. Ethan took out his phone, no signal. "I think we've gone a little off course. Go back about 200 meters, then take the right branch." Emily was still nervous, but she didn't want to disturb the atmosphere. So she nodded. They turned back, but the familiar path they had known earlier seemed to be gone. No red string, no old shoe prints, just woods, trees, and shadows that grew longer by the minute. "Are you sure?" Jessica asked. Her eyes filled with doubt for the first time. "Sure." Ethan tightened his grip on his backpack. His voice was calm, but sweat was forming on his forehead. A small crack sounded in the distance. A branch snapped, then silence. The three of them stood still. No one spoke. The woods were no longer their friends. They were becoming something else. "We should stop and replan our route," Emily said. But she was breathing hard now. They stopped under a large tree. Ethan spread out a map on the ground, tracing the route from memory. But paper maps couldn't tell what the woods were hiding. And things like memories in the woods weren't reliable. The sky was starting to turn grey. There were no rest stops, no cars. There was no sign of the outside world. Jessica reached out and squeezed Ethan's hand. "I trust you, but don't pretend to know everything. We need each other." For the first time that day, Ethan didn't answer. And in that moment, the forest closed the door behind them. The last light of the day had turned orange, filtering through the branches like thin silk threads. But the forest was no longer as gentle as it had been in the morning. Every gust of wind seemed to remind him this place did not want strangers. Ethan slowed down. His face was grim, his eyes darting around. He knew he was losing his bearings, not only in the path, but also in the trust Jessica and Emily had placed in him. "Are you sure we're going the right way?" Emily asked, her voice lower than usual. Ethan didn't answer. He looked ahead, then glanced at the map, which was now a meaningless piece of paper. A noise rang out. Click, not far to the left. All three of them stopped. It must be a squirrel. Jessica tried to lighten the mood, but then there was another noise, this time longer, heavier, like footsteps. Not a squirrel. Ethan stepped forward, shielding the two behind him. "We need to find someplace high to look out." Before he could finish his sentence, a tall, dark figure appeared from the bushes ahead. The man wore an old leather jacket, army pants torn at the knees, his face without a mask, but covered in mud. He stood straight, holding a shotgun, the barrel pointed at the ground, but his eyes were locked on the group like a hungry wolf. "Good afternoon," he said. His voice was hoarse, drawn out as if he hadn't spoken to anyone in years. "Lost?" Ethan swallowed. "Yes, we're just looking for a way back to the rest stop. No trespassing intended." "Oh, a rest stop." His voice was full of sarcasm. He took a step forward. And from either side, 3 more people appeared, also in old clothes, holding knives or wooden sticks. One of the group was female, short hair, cold face. Emily grabbed Jessica's hand. Ethan raised his hands, his voice even. "We don't have anything of value, just a family camping. If you need food, water, or a phone, we'll give it to you." The first man didn't answer. He just turned and whistled. From behind the tree, the 5th man stepped out. He wasn't taller than the others, but there was something different about him. He walked straight. His eyes were as sharp as knives, and the shotgun on his shoulder wasn't for scaring, it was for killing. He stepped closer, looking at all 3 of them as if he were reading every layer of their skin. "What do we have here?" he asked. His voice was deep, thickly American, without a trace of vulgarity. He spoke as if he were reading a script. "A family, a husband, a wife, and a sister." The long-haired man answered instead, pointing to each of them. Ethan took Jessica's hand. He chuckled, then put the shotgun on the ground. My name is Ruger, and I hate being let down. Ruger stepped closer to Ethan, only a few feet away. You think you're taking your family on a trip, but you're actually leading them to the mouth of a hook. Why? He glanced at the two women, his gaze sizing up the merchandise. No gold, no guns, no drugs, no good information. Sad. Ethan shivered slightly. I can give you my credit card. The password. My house is in Missoula. I won't call the police. We just want to go home. Ruger stepped closer to Ethan, stopped, his eyes boring into his. Do you think there are people who have lived here their whole lives, never having the chance to say, we just want to go home? No one answered. Ruger exhaled, then turned. Tie them up. Take them to camp. The order was as cold as a wind that cut through his spine. The two men advanced. Ethan reflexively tried to stop them, but was pushed to the ground. Emily screamed. Jessica struggled, but within seconds, the three were separated, their hands tied with a rough nylon rope. They were led away. Ruger's back in the lead, steady, cold, like the nameless shadow in the stories America had tried to forget in the deep woods. Tsenan. The wooden shack where the bandits lived appeared in the middle of the forest, like a lonely note in the brilliant symphony of nature. The wooden frames were crooked. The walls were made of rusty, corrugated iron, and a half-burning fire was smoking. The sound of wooden boards creaking, the sound of mosquitoes buzzing, all combined to create a rough, out-of-place feeling, just like the people living here, Ethan, Jessica, and Emily, were pushed into a space in the middle of the camp. Their hands were tied behind their backs, sitting back to back like goods awaiting judgment. Ruger stood in the middle of the yard, holding a cup of water. He slowly sipped, looking at the three people as if he were evaluating an old item. Do you think we're a bunch of idiots living on the edge, only knowing how to steal food and burn trash? He asked, his voice as even as a saw blade. Ethan didn't answer. Jessica breathed heavily, trying to stay calm. Emily looked down at the ground. Ruger nodded. He threw the cup to the ground, breaking it. Nothing of value, no money, no news, no fun. The long-haired Travis laughed. Let me kill someone for fun. Ruger. Ruger raised his hand. No. Then he stepped in front of Ethan. You, a man, a leader, a husband, a brother. I want to hear something, of value from you. And if you don't, I'll... He didn't finish, but the curl of his lips said it all. Ethan raised his head. I'll do anything. I beg you, sir, to spare them. Keep me. Use me as a hostage. They did nothing wrong. Ruger looked at him for a moment. Then he laughed. A long, hoarse laugh, followed by the laughter of his men. You think your death will have any meaning? You have nothing. No one will remember you when you die. But if you have to choose, you will remember it for the rest of your life. Earth's. The night fell like an iron curtain. The firelight danced on the bandits' faces, on Ethan's eyes, and on Ruger's gun. He sat on a wooden chair, a cigarette burning, the shotgun resting on his lap. Now listen, Calder, I have a trick. Jessica and Emily were pulled to either side. Each had a knife held to their backs. Their eyes blurred in the firelight. The cold winds slithered down their throats like claws. Ruger said, one of us will die tonight, and you, Ethan Calder, will choose. Ethan shook his head frantically. No, I will die instead. I beg you, don't make me do it. No, Ruger growled. I don't need your life. I need your choice. I need to see a man torn apart by love. That's what counts, Emily cried. Jessica whispered, Ethan, choose me. She's young. She has a future. Emily shook her head. No, I'm the troublemaker. You're the one he loves. Please, choose. Ethan knelt down. His eyes were wide open, full of blood. Don't make me. I can't, Ruger chuckled. He held up his watch. 30 seconds. If not, I'll choose for you. Ethan looked at each person. The person who had been with him for 10 years. The person who had grown up with him all his life. Who deserved to live more. Who could bear the loss more. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Ruger looked at his watch. 5 seconds. Jessica closed her eyes. Emily gasped. 1. The fire splits twice. Bang. The first blast split the air. Bang. The second seemed to nail the corpse of silence. When Ethan opened his eyes, both bodies were on the ground. Blood was smeared on the grass. Smoke was still hanging. And everything was silent. Ethan collapsed. His face was pressed to the ground, tears mingling with blood. He did not scream, did not cry, did not speak, because there was no sound that could express the devastation. Ruger stepped over the bodies of the two women. He glanced down at Ethan. Silence is a choice, Calder. Then he turned away, ordering his men to leave the camp. No one took anything. No one spoke. Ethan was left between two cooling bodies in the darkness of the Bitterroot, a place without God. The wind blew across his bare chest like 1,000 tiny knives, and a man fell apart, piece by piece. Saved, not forsaken, Tuesday morning. The rescue helicopter circled over the Bitterroot as the early morning sun crept over the mountaintops. A search party stopped by a shallow stream, where there were signs of fires and dried blood on the rocks. No one spoke, but everyone held their breath. And then they found Ethan. He sat against a rotten tree, his face covered in tangled beard, his eyes wide and unblinking. His hands were stiff, no longer bound, but still held in the same position, as if he were handcuffed. His shirt was torn, stained with dark brown blood. The smell of death had dissipated into the woods, but something else remained, the smell of unnamed loss. Meteor, Calder, a rescue worker, said softly. Ethan didn't respond. He just whispered, almost inaudibly, I didn't choose. The helicopter took him to the town of Missoula. Police, doctors, psychologists, they were all there. But no one got any answers except one, I didn't choose, I didn't choose. The local papers ran the headline, 3 people attacked in Bitterroot, 2 dead, 1 alive. The media called him a victim. The people called him lucky. Only Ethan knew he didn't survive. He was left behind. The moving body everyone saw was just a shell. He lived on, but in a world that had lost sound, light, and choice. Funeral without words, 2 coffins lay side by side in the white wooden chapel. One for Jessica, one for Emily. White lilies covered them. No words were spoken, no long eulogies, no sharing of feelings. Just handshakes, brief hugs, and glances that did not dare to look at Ethan for too long. He sat in the front row, alone, in an unironed black suit, his eyes vacant. No tears, no shaking, just silence, as if his soul had entered one of the other coffins. Jessica's mother, a widow, a stern woman, came to him after the funeral. Do you know who did it? She asked. her voice restrained. Ethan nodded. And what couldn't I do? Ethan clenched his fists. It's not that I couldn't, he said, for the first time in days. It's just, I didn't do it. The mother didn't ask any more questions. She turned away. From that moment on, Ethan was no longer a husband, no longer a brother, no longer anything in their eyes. That night, in their old apartment, Ethan gathered all the family photos, letters, mementos, put them in a wooden chest. He locked it, labeling it with a single word, "Do not open, unless you learn to say someone's name when you need it most." The chest has never been opened again. 2 years later, Ethan lives in a small town in northern Idaho. He works as a support worker for a forest rescue team, a job that is low-key, sweaty, and where no one cares who he used to be. Every week he gets calls from lost people, inexperienced hikers, or children who have strayed too far from camp. He never says much, but he's always there. In the cabin near the Clearwater River, a single thing hung proudly on the wall, an old map of the Bitterroot Forest, with 2 dark red dots circled in ink. The first dot was where he had been ambushed. The second dot was where he had been abandoned. A broken line ran between them, no path, no notes, just a shaky handwriting, the place where silence weighs more than death. Every year, on that exact day, Ethan returned to the Bitterroot Forest. He told no one. He told no one. He went alone. He carried flowers. He carried a notebook. And he always stopped at the exact spot where the gunshot had sounded. He sat there for hours. He didn't pray. He didn't cry. Just sat in silence, just like that year. But this time, silence was the only thing he chose. The ghost that doesn't scream that day. The rescue team received a call from a young couple. Their 8-year-old daughter had gotten lost while cycling near the southern woods. It was dusk. Ethan volunteered to go. The woods were unusually cold that day. The wind was light but bitter. Ethan carried a flashlight, a map, and an old notebook. He followed the tire tracks, stepping over tree roots that jutted out like the spines of time. Every sound around reminded him, not of death, but of the moment right before death's silence. Near midnight, he saw the girl, huddled under a tree, her eyes red. Ethan knelt down, holding out his hand. "I'm Ethan. I'm here to take you home." The girl was trembling, but not panicking. She whispered, "I know. You'll find me." Ethan stiffened. He lowered his head, the flashlight beam illuminating the gravel. "You'll find me." The words echoed in his head like an echo through the old canyon. He drove her home. He didn't say a word. When he handed her back to her parents, he just nodded and turned away. That night, when he got home, he didn't sleep. He opened the old notebook. For the first time in 3 years, Ethan began writing not to Jessica or Emily, but to himself. The first page opened. The first line I didn't choose, but I survived. What does that mean? Ethan wrote for weeks, without anyone reading. Each letter was a confession, an indictment, a cry for help. He wrote to the 2 dead, to what was left of him, to silence. One of the letters read, "Jessica, I miss you not because you died, but because you tried to help me choose, and I still couldn't. Emily, you trusted me until the end, and I let that trust rot in silence. I didn't die in the Bitterroot, but the best part of me did." He put all the letters in a large envelope, no address, no sender's name, just 3 bold words on the front, forgiveness pending. The envelope was sealed, and he placed it next to the old wooden chest, the place where memories were locked away for so long. That's when Ethan knew forgiveness doesn't come from someone else. It starts with facing the thing you dare not name. Spring of fourth year. Ethan returns to the Bitterroot forest for the last time. No flowers, no food. Just a leather notebook and a small carved piece of wood. He walked along the old trails, past the bandits' campsite, now a clearing, overgrown with moss. He reached his destination, where the two bodies had lain. He sat down, stuck the piece of wood into the ground, and carved, "Silence is a voice too." But sometimes it comes too late. The wind blew, rotting leaves. The sky was misty, but there was no fear, no torment, just a quiet acceptance. That night, Ethan returned home. He placed the notebook on the table, locked the door, and wrote a final entry in his diary. Tomorrow, I will open the box again. The next morning, his door was found slightly open. On the table was a notebook, a sealed envelope, and the trunk was open. Inside was a picture of Jessica smiling, Emily with pigtails, and a small handwritten note: "I don't need forgiveness anymore. I have chosen, this time, myself." In the Bitterroot woods, the wind blew like a whisper again, but this time, not of a ghost, but of a man who had finally chosen.